Hi guys, my name is Christina and welcome to my channel and welcome to yet another episode of the podcast. So in today's episode, I decided to dip my toe in the very big subject that is big socially, and it's very big in creating art and in writing, in drawing, all of that. And that being is about writing diversely, writing diverse characters, or drawing diverse characters, in my case, kind of both. So there is so much I want to discuss in this topic, but I also want to approach this topic, I don't want to say like carefully, but I want to make sure I approach it with a careful language, because my idea is not, my hope is not to stir controversial opinions. My hope is not to, create some sort of discourse. My hope is just to add my 5 cents to the conversation and hopefully help us all figure out how to do that properly. Because in current environment, like if you don't have the characters that are, not your identity in your story, then you're problematic. Or if you do write characters of identity that are different than yours, you're problematic. It's like it's complicated either way. And I feel that desire of like our current society, to at least Western society, to make sure we show diversity in our cast of characters and write about diverse cultures, diverse ethnicities, diverse sexualities, and all of that. We want to show all the different characters. So currently, I think what is happening is like the pendulum is swaying to the point that we're almost like very outspoken about this. And while some writers are starting to incorporate more and more diversity into what they're creating, then more and more readers are really sitting there with a magnifying glass and looking at everything that is being done and criticizing everything. And sometimes criticism is made because it has to be made, and sometimes criticism is made because of all the different reasons. Like, for example, people want to appear woke, they want to be the one who is like appears as an ally and whatnot. It's a very complicated thing. But I feel like it's just part of us figuring out how to do that, how to, make our world a better place, make art better, and just progress as human race, and just do better. So that's why I just want to dip my toes into the topic very carefully. I just want to make sure that I'm not creating, again, like I'm not swinging the pendulum either way. I just want it to be like as neutral of a conversation as possible while adding my opinion. So let's see how well I do here. So I definitely want to do the whole video talking about how to draw different ethnicities, because that's something you have to learn to do, to draw different ethnicities. And it's not as easy as you might think. And it's a beast on its own. And this is something, if you guys see what I'm doing in my comic, I'm drawing mostly different ethnicities than my own currently, because first arc of my story has, like, where it's set, it has people that are not looking like myself. But this video is gonna come a little later as I figure out how I want to approach this video. And today, I just want to add just a couple of thoughts to the conversation from yours truly. So my first point that I want to make is that when you are writing diversity, I would avoid calling this representation. So the representation is the word that I actually dislike, and I dislike what it means. And I don't think it's like useful in any way to art creation process. And it's also, I don't find that is very respectful to whoever we are quote unquote representing, because it's like, don't write your character to just represent somebody. That's not how you write a character overall, right? You write a character and you make your character a certain way, from certain culture, from certain ethnicity, being certain sexuality and whatnot, having certain struggles, not because you want to appease some group of people. That's just wrong way to go about it. And just because you want to explore a certain character, because you're deeply interested in this character and in whatever this character is going through and the background this character has and how this character fits in the world, being who they are. The true reason why you ever write any character should be because you really want to write this character, because you really care, because you're really interested, and because you have something to say, like you have to something to explore, like because your passion is there and your heart is there. And you shouldn't approach and be like, oh, what people, what I should represent, like people gonna like if I represent something and whatnot, or like I need to represent people. Like, don't do that. Like, the thing is, the way you're gonna start writing diversity, you're gonna start writing diverse characters because you really care to write them, is when you get educated and expand your horizons. When you are expanding your horizon and you're exposed to different people, to different cultures, to different people, to different humans, right? Then more variations of humans close up, right? And then when you start thinking what character you want to write, you have more variations of what inspires you, right? I'm thinking that certain people tend to write certain characters that are not particularly diverse is not because they're just bad people and don't want to represent quote unquote anybody else. It's just I think it's because they're not exposed to a huge variety of people, and they don't maybe think like from the top of their head who they can write, right? Default in their head looks a certain way. And the more you expand horizons and the more cultures you interact with and the more you get involved, the more when you think, I want to have a character, this is kind of what the character I want to write. At this point, this character in your head can take different shapes, because now you're exposed to different types of people, and now you will be interested in the palette of people and the palette of human expression is wider in your brain. And then when you're thinking about characters that you want to show, you might be inspired to create a character of different identity than your own because you interact with those people more. I hope that makes sense. So just expand your knowledge of people and cultures, interact with people from different backgrounds, really get to know people and get yourself interested in people and their backgrounds, and then once you've done that, then you would be more interested to create characters like this. So for me, at least, I feel easier to say because I live in Toronto and Canada is overall a pretty diverse country, and obviously there is problems in Canada as well. However, I feel like especially in Toronto, it's an extremely diverse city, and just being Canadians, people are pretty friendly here. Like Canadians would argue that, Toronto is the rudest city in Canada, which is true, but the rudest city in Canada is still a very friendly city, compared to the whole world. And there, no matter where you go, like you will just, like everybody is so diverse. Everybody is from so many different cultures, different backgrounds, and different places. And some people are there like from these places because they came as a child. Some people, they really immigrated like 3 years ago, and the difference is everywhere. So no matter where you look, you will spot a different person. I feel like minority in Toronto is actual Canadian-born Canadians. But yeah, I don't know. So to me, it's easy to see it this way because I see so many people from different walks of life, from different backgrounds and different identities, and I'm just mesmerized every day. And when I think what character I can create, I'm like, the last person I think to create is just somebody like me, white-looking person that is female. I'm not thinking like I'm thinking about everything else, literally. The two main characters in my story, they are pretty Caucasian looking. However, that's mostly because I started creating my story when I was in Russia, and this was the people that were around me. Kuroi, one of my characters, the guy who has like long black hair, I draw him pretty regularly in this podcast, and I show him a lot. When I was creating my comic in Russia, so Tsukai, the female protagonist, she was like looking very Caucasian because that was an enormous standard as the first kind of person type of a person that I looked about. And even her, I like make her hair white and whatever, I like was like adding some fantasy elements. But for Kuroi, actually I kept the idea of a person who is Middle Eastern in mind, type of for his appearance, but has like blue eyes. So I was thinking like Jewish-ish, somewhat like European Jewish appearance, but I didn't specify. That's not like what I'm putting labels on it right now, trying to analyze it, like going back. But back then I was actually trying to think about somebody looking not super standard. and he doesn't look super standard to a person that you will typically see in Russia while looking around, right? And that just comes to show that surroundings that you have will influence what you see is a default and what you see is norm, like standard thing. And norm does not mean that you think that the norm is the best way. It's just the variation you had type of thing. So that would be my first thought that I wanted to add, is just the idea when you're creating diversity is that you want to try to diversify people around you, and you don't want to represent. You want to truly write the character that you want to write, but your exposure to different cultures and people will help you to just have a lot of variation in your head, so that when you're passionate about a certain character, different characters come to mind that you are passionate about. So this is one thought that I have. Another thought that I have is the context is the absolute key to writing cultures and like different diverse group respectfully, in my opinion. And it sounds easier than it is, just because when I'm saying context, it means, well, that's easy, it's just one word, right? But it's not. You have to really know the context. For example, if you're writing a character who, let's say, a child of Korean immigrants in US, for example, like that's not super crazy idea, but for example, right? Or we can say like one their parent is Korean and another parent is Hispanic, for example. But the person was born in US, American, but they will look a certain way. So to write this character, you shouldn't be thinking, okay, so how the character, like my character, for example, will look like. In this particular case, probably Asian, probably with a little bit darker skin tone, or maybe just Asian looking, and you shouldn't be thinking okay, let's now write an Asian character. No, you have to think about context of this particular character, their upbringing, and the context of how society around them reacts to both identities of each of their parent and identity of this character. And also you have to think about location of the country they're currently in, the city they're currently in, the area of the city they're currently in. Then you have to think about, okay, what school did they go through? Like, did they go to public school? Did this public school has a lot of diverse kids already, so they were not very standing out, so they didn't come to learn that something about them is unusual, they didn't maybe experience a lot of, being ostracized for who they are. Or maybe they went, like their parents worked super hard and they, for example, went to, school that is some fancy school that has primarily Caucasian people in there, and they stood out a lot and they had constantly proved themselves there, like against stereotypes that those people probably had. What are the options? Because you have to think about all of this context, because who we are, who we form as people, and how we feel about who we are comes a lot through what our family taught us about who we are, what our childhood environment told us about who we are, and what was our experience growing up. So then when the person is adult and they, or young adult or whatever, they enter life in different areas, they already have certain basis and base of what they feel about themselves. And now they're not as gullible, right? They already was like their belief about who they are was already put in them, bad or good, whatever it was. And now as they enter the bigger world, that belief they will carry with them. So that's type of idea of the, for example, context. And this is how we can think about people with different sexuality. What was their experience, what time frame they were, what time they were living, what city they're living, think about what government was currently ruling, like was it liberals, were the conservatives, I don't know, like what was the atmosphere and the context of their bringing or their growing up. So only then you can do the good job, I think. And it's not easy. You have to really think about, you have to really do analysis, you have to really go to the locations and analyze the location, see how it could be, and just think about it and talk to people from that location. Just don't generalize. And because especially to me, when I see a lot of conversation being talked about diversity and how to write characters, certain, for example, ethnic group, again, now being from Toronto, being from one ethnic group means absolutely nothing. It really means how you grew up, what your ethnic group, how did it feel to be the ethnic group. And a lot of kids, for example, here like people here when they were children. They have absolutely different experience. So, for example, one example that I can bring is that I have a friend, and she is half African, half Ukrainian. And she actually, like, her parents, they knew that, like, first of all, in Russia, like, the relationship Russians have with particularly people of African descent is different than it is in US. We didn't have certain history that US had. So we perceive those people differently. Like, don't get me wrong, Russia is, East in many other ways and to a lot of different cultures, including myself being Jewish, but that's a story for another time, or maybe not even for the internet. But anyway, in Russia we perceive people of African descent completely differently that people perceive them in the West, and this is actually a more preferable perception, speaking about like negative version of how you can really point person out for how they look, right? So because we would assume this person would look exotic to us, more Americanized to us, which is a good thing. Like, it will feel like a person coming from a better world, it's more popular type of person. So my friend's experience is that, and she actually has 2 videos on YouTube herself here talking about those things, and unfortunately those videos are in Russian. I will link them down below if you guys want to. And so her parents, they thought, well, it's, how, she obviously looking black, but at the same time they were aware about social context in Russia, and they knew it wouldn't be like they knew it wouldn't be the situation like in the West, right? But at the same time, they knew kids don't like kids that look different. That's overall, like, kids gonna bully you for literally anything, for the freckles, for the color of your hair, for like the length of your hair, for like, I don't know, bruises that you have, like anything, like, kids, like kids are cruel, let me just say. But so they sent her to a more private school, the more fancy school, and where to protect her just from people just bullying her on the basis of her just looking different, not because she's looking black, but because she's just looking different. And that was the main concern. And she grew up in a pretty normal environment. And when she came here to Canada, she was mostly surprised how her experience growing up and her feeling about herself was completely different than feeling of a lot of black people who grew up in Canada. And she actually is doing great in life. According to her, she never felt prejudice, because when it was thrown her way, she would shake it off, because she didn't believe that at all, because she grew up where certain rhetoric didn't exist. So even like it's very complex what she's saying. I'm definitely simplifying it for the sake of this video, because I wish you guys could listen to what she's saying, because her perspective is really interesting and kind of shows how where you grew up, how it shapes what you believe about yourself and like your overall confidence about who you are. It's very interesting. Maybe I will invite her to my channel to talk about it. She likes talking. She used to teach in college, so she's that gal. So I'm considering doing it at some point. But overall, it's just the context is very, very, very important, and you have to really make a major research on that and really zone in and really think about and do your due diligence. And this is, I think, how it can be improved and your result can be better. In my case, I'm creating a fantasy story. Currently, the characters that are in the northern province, like this is the location that the first arc of my story is set in, I decided to make them look kind of Chinese Mongolian and Asian Russian. This is was my decision. So they appear Asian looking. However, the culture that they are in is not Asian. The culture is like northern province culture. It's like a completely fantasy culture. And I decided that I don't want just, Caucasian looking people walking around. I want people looking different. And I decided that this particular location for the first arc is just not going to be Caucasian one. It's going to be that one. But the context for my story, so for me, it's kind of not a cheat, but I don't have to deal with this context because I just have to create the context, basically. And so for my characters that are from this fantasy world, there's no context of our world. So that's the only situation. However, I'm creating context like this within this world, how certain cultures there perceive people of different ethnicity, because I have races in my world that are not like human races. They're different, because I do have similar conflict, but I'm completely inventing the context that I can play with it later. So that's I'm not like bypassing the situation, by I'm basically staging the context, and I'm staging all these issues instead of learning from in real life and writing about them. It doesn't mean that I'm not learning about them in real life overall for my own entertainment, but yeah. And the last thing I wanted to talk about in this video, but as I said, I probably will end up touching upon this topic many more times because it's very important for writing people, right? So, and this point is, don't be woke for other people. The thing is, I find that because with current culture and with current environment where there is like people gonna be canceled online for certain things, or people gonna be, deified for being inclusive, it's like we see it people happening with brand, like certain brand worked with certain person who did some unfavorable talks about other identities and other diverse groups, and then brand is canceled, but the brand who uses certain people like of different like diverse groups, and then they're deified. It's a whole mess. So obviously, as the social issue arises, and as we are working actively towards it, and as we actively as people trying to make it better, obviously it will be used by people. People are going to be using that for either good publicity or for money reasons or whatnot, trying to look woke, progressive, super exclusive, an ally, blah, blah, blah. So some people obviously are that, but I assume that people who are naturally that don't go and scream about that, because why? Like, just live your life being a good person, just live your life being an ally, just live your life accepting other people, learn more, but you don't have to go and scream about how you are that, because that feels like you're overcompensating for something. It's weird, kind of like, for example, if you feel like violence is bad, you just feel bad about it and you want to avoid violence and you want to make sure everybody's at peace and everybody's happy. Like, I don't think you're going to be talking about how I just such a gentle soul, I just hate violence, like everybody who's doing violence is bad and I'm so good. Like, I don't think you would be doing that. I think you would be just living your life according to your beliefs, right? You will be trying to avoid violence when you have. You will try to make sure to stop it when you can, and you will not engage in activities that you think are too violent, and lead by example or something like this. So I just feel when you perform wokeness, talk about how woke you are, how woke your story is and whatnot, it's not serving anybody. It's not helping. It doesn't enrich your story either, because I think the best characters always made because you have your heart in these characters, because you really deeply care about this character. It's not because you want to look good. And the thing is, when you do that, other people can see that. Maybe they cannot see it now, where, we're all really heightened on this idea to look good and look an ally. Maybe people are not going to see it now, but people will see it eventually. Don't do this because of that. It's just disservice to your story, disservice to diverse people, disservice to literally everybody. Don't do that. Do something you really care about. Do things and write things because you want to, you believe in them, and this is what you want to write about. Don't do that. Like, it's not good writing. It's not good personing type of thing. Like, don't do that. Like, I just feel it helps no one, it doesn't serve anybody. Or, if it feels like it's working, I'm pretty sure it's not a long-term thing. So that's all my thoughts for today's video that I wanted to touch upon. That's a big subject, I guess. As I said, we're going to be talking about it more, and I still will be talking about how to draw ethnicities and genders and whatnot, and just overall, just want to start a conversation about this, because as authors, as writers, as creators, we have to be aware. We have to, as the world realizes that we could be and should be better, we should be on the forefront of this, learning how to do that. So that's my thoughts. Let me guys know what you think about this, your thoughts. As I always say, let's have it as a conversation. And I hope you guys are doing great. I hope you're having a good day, and I hope to see you in my next podcast, my next video. And thank you so much guys for watching. I see you in my next one. Bye.